This is David and his terrarium, which he has not watered in about 50 years, making it one of the oldest closed terrariums in existence. I thought it looks pretty damn cool, so I decided to make one for myself. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Reese, and in today's video, I am literally going to take you through the build process of this 54-liter closed terrarium, plus a side story along the way. One other important piece of context for this video is that this is Bo. I have known Bo for a long time, and he has become one of my closest friends over the years. He is what I would call an expert gardener, so I thought it would be a good idea to have him tag along with the build. And finally, just a bit of backstory. I used to love going on adventures with my friends. I would do all kinds of random things like road tripping out into the middle of a canola field to take a photo, or to a jetty where I hung a hammock and swung from it, just because I could. And these are just a few just off the top of my head. There are so many others. These were small random things that I loved doing, and I have since lost track of time and now find myself too busy to be actively pursuing and planning these fun activities and adventures. So I thought to myself, why not use YouTube as the platform to capture and document these fun things that I still do occasionally? Although this is still a financial channel, this is a finance channel, I think I'm going to start another series where in this series, every couple of months, every 3 to 5 months, I post a video around stuff like what is going to be in today's video, because I still think it's important to capture the world outside of finance. Finance is great when you're in control of it, but having the ability to do stuff like this and not really worry about the cost or what you should be doing during that time that you could technically be making money, as an example, it's a good way to segue out of the financial mindset and just kind of detox and enjoy the little things. And I do believe posting videos like this occasionally will give others ideas and challenges about things that they could do for themselves, which might be enjoyable. And okay, you might also ask, how can making a terrarium be fun? It doesn't seem like the most enjoyable thing to do in the world. And the simple answer to that is that I really struggle to turn off. I really struggle to allocate downtime to just kind of take a break and relax. I am a very routine-based and organized person, which often leads me going through random emotions as days and weeks and months go on and pass, where I haven't allocated time to just sit back and relax, or take some time out of my very scheduled and busy routine to just do something that I'm actively or actually interested in. Everyone has goals and everyone have things that they are actively trying to achieve, and they do it at their own pace, and that's great. But what they don't realize is it's okay every now and then to just sit back and take a break. And what comes from that is a detox, a moment of clarity, a moment of just taking a breath and feeling great. And that's what this build was for me. It was something where it's something different. It's something that I was just away from technology, and I got to spend an afternoon putting it together after doing ridiculous amounts of research. But here we are, finished product. It's sitting as a centerpiece in my office, and I love it. And it was so much fun to do. So enjoy the ride, enjoy the process, and if you're interested in doing one yourself, this should be pretty helpful and explanatory. I'm sorry if you've just come for the tutorial and not the actual content. Enjoy the build. In this video, we are going over the process that I followed to build this closed glass terrarium. I've left links down in the description below to all the materials and tools I used. And while you're down there, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button for me. I really appreciate the support. Okay, so here we go. I found an old glass Demijohn, which I usually use to hold wine while it ferments. I cleaned it out using distilled water and a brush tool, which can be bought online. A quick side note is that using distilled water or demineralized water is important, as tap water can potentially damage your plants as it contains chlorine. The materials that I used to build the false bottom and the substrate, which is another word for soil mix, include coconut coir, horticultural charcoal, aquarium rocks or gravel, sphagnum moss, propagating sand, and orchid mix. And to separate the aquarium rocks from the substrate, we used Fiberglass Fly Screen. To start off with, we measured out the diameter of roughly where we thought the gravel would reach once in the container. And I'm gonna jump ahead quickly because this is important. With the Fiberglass Fly Screen, what we later did was tie a piece of string to our original cutout and actually dropped it into the enclosure. What we found was the diameter of this was too small, so we cut a larger one using excess fiberglass. It's actually quite cheap to buy. I highly encourage you to do some testing using a piece of string just so that you get it right from the start. And before we actually put anything into the glass enclosure, to be prepared, we made the substrate mix or the soil mix first. So what we did was we loosened the sphagnum moss and soaked it in distilled water to make it nice and moist. And we did the same thing for the coco coir, but I kind of forgot to record it, so my bad. So to actually make this loose, free draining soil retention substrate, we used a pot as a measuring cup. So just based on our measurements, filling the pot counted as 1 part. The substrate was made up of 1 part coconut coir, 2 parts sphagnum moss, 1 part propagating sand, and 1 part orchid mix. And we doubled the quantity because of the size of the Demijohn. If you were going to make your own, make enough substrate for the container you're using, but use the same measurement of parts to get the right mix. And this is where the build actually began. So we started by adding our aquarium rocks or gravel to the Demijohn. We forgot a funnel, which would have been a handy tool to have, so we got creative and used a watering can to pour them in. You want the height of your rocks or gravel to be about 3/4 or 75% of what your substrate or soil mix will be when in the enclosure. Then we added the fiberglass fly screen and put a generous amount of horticultural charcoal on top. The charcoal helps filter the water as it makes its way through the substrate and into the false bottom, ready to condense and make its way back up the Demijohn or the container to continue the water cycle. Next up, we added the substrate mix. We kind of eyeballed this based on the level that the gravel was at based on what we had added earlier. We also made a mess. Then we spread it out using this spatula looking device. You could use anything that really fits in the hole to do this. It was quite a small diameter. You literally could have used a long stick. Now it was time to add our plants. The plants that I used were a peperomia, baby tears, a pink Fittonia, and another peperomia. We started off by gently removing the soil from the plants so that they could be squeezed through the top gap of our container. We started with the Fittonia as it was the largest and then added the others after. This was by far the most fiddly component of the build. I'm glad I bought a pair of these aquarium tweezers, otherwise we probably wouldn't have been able to grip anything once it was placed in the container. One really important thing to note is to tie string to everything that isn't going to end up in the terrarium, especially your tools. We actually did drop something in there and this saved us at one point during the build. We only used a small amount of the baby tears as well because we believed that eventually it will consume the entire terrarium as they like to creep. The rest we donated to charity. Once the plants were in their general positions, we used a piece of bamboo to pat down the edges of the plants into the soil to try and pack them in a bit. One very important thing that we needed to add as well to keep mold and decaying matter to a minimum was springtails. We added springtails, which are a common and cheap addition to terrariums to keep basically the enclosure clean. There are many ways to add springtails to a terrarium, but I used a baster to suck them up after adding some distilled water to their container, and then squirted them into the terrarium. Adding water was next. This is something that can be overdone, and I believe that I actually did overdo it, because for the first few days there was a lot of condensation built up in the enclosure. I wiped the excess condensation off using a magnetic aquarium cleaner, but you could easily just air out the container as well until it subsides. Also note that it is normal to see condensation in the morning or at night, but it should usually clear up during the day. That's how you know you've got your water amounts at a relatively good level. You want the substrate mix to stay moist. That's the most important thing to keep your plants nice and healthy. Again, we used a baster to run water down the sides of the enclosure to clean any dirt that got caught when we were adding the other components of the build. And finally, we added the cork to seal it off. And bam, I now have my very own terrarium. Subscribe to the channel to see if it survives. I'm sure it will make an appearance in many of my future videos. And while you're down there, don't forget to leave a comment on any topic or activity that you think I might find value in trying and giving a go. I like the idea of trying new things, and people have all sorts of hobbies, experiences, and interests that I probably would be interested in trying myself. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to turn on bell notifications so you don't miss any of the videos coming out over the next 10,000 years, because that's how old I'm definitely going to live to, and I will see you in the next one.